Yeah, boy, it's June 30th and it's episode 759, and this is the Fantasy Football Auctioneer. I'm your temporary host, Slim. The Fantasy Football Auctioneer is the official podcast of the fantasyfootballauction.com, the internet's only website dedicated to fantasy football auctions. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/fantasy football auctioneer, or follow us on Twitter and Instagram at fantasy auction. Also, if you want to be part of social media's first and only auction community, follow at FF Auction Advice on Twitter. We've been getting quite a few followers here in the last couple of weeks. It's a good thing to bounce mock draft ideas, budget strategies, auction prices, and all sorts of ideas from the plethora of auction aficionados that are out there online. Actually, I threw you out there a couple times. Hey there, Blister. Not to throw you in here yet before we introduce, but a couple people were talking about mocks, right? And I know you've been doing some mocking, but we'll get into that later.
For sure. Yeah, I did have a few questions. I'm not sure how well I answered them, but the people seem to be happy, so I hope that's true. I already want to say you used a couple bigger words than Uncle Buckets already.
I tried. I wanted to throw a stamp on this episode, actually. So
oh shit!
What are you baking?
Oven's ready. Just a second. I don't know.
If you have been tacos like me, I had to bake my taco shells earlier.
Banana bread's almost ready to go in the oven. I guess I don't even know how to stop that. I guess.
Oh, Grandma Blister. Well, you go ahead. I'll keep going here.
Good. No, that's good. It's all good. It's done. It's ready. We're good.
All right. Well, we have a great show for you tonight.
Despite that, it's going to be good.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. We're going to talk about a couple little tidbits of news, even though it's a slow season, probably non-newsworthy, but whatever. We got to talk about it because it is some news. And we're going to just get into a little bit of discussion that maybe ties into a little bit of the questions that guys have been asking through social media and through email questions and things like that. So we're just going to actually talk football since Uncle Buckets isn't here. We can kind of do whatever the hell we want to, and that's what we're going to do. All right. But of course, our experts/analysts, they're always here. You'd think he was getting royalty checks from the super terrific happy hour with how many times he signed his name today. Blister, is your hand going to be able to hold a club and a beverage tomorrow with your writer's cramp?
Absolutely. I did have to sign a lot of report cards today, which is, it's never a fun part because there's so many you have to read through and stuff. But yeah, it'll be good to go. Tomorrow's Canada Day for all our Canadian listeners. Happy Canada Day in advance for our Americans, friends to the south. A few more days so they can celebrate. But we'll, of course, being on the border, celebrate for both of the occasions and probably each day in between because we are on holidays now. So time to ramp up the auction work and the information on the site and the podcasts and just get ourselves ready for drafts. But I'm pumped. And golf tomorrow, golf Thursday. Got to get that handicap into a respectable range.
Well, I don't know about playing in a spouse scramble tomorrow is going to do anything for your handicap, but whatever.
No, that won't help.
But just don't get into a domestic on the golf course. That's all.
Tomorrow should be pretty low key. It's the one on July 9th. It'll be better because it's free beer for that tournament on July 9th. So
actually, we're playing in that.
Doesn't really matter win or lose, I think. You are too? Right on.
Yeah, I'll send you your name.
Johnny and Tex.
Yeah,
right on. Yeah, well, we're playing
too, so
with the other neighbors, the Bonderchooks. So
that's what she said. Fun. Yeah, that'll be good. It sounds like free beer, right? Can't be
$60 for the tournament, and that's your golf and your cart and booze and prizes, and that's just amazing. Oh, only in a good old USFA. Nothing that fun can happen in Canada.
Thank you guys. Yeah, you know how to throw good golf tournaments. That's that. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's awesome. So
all right. Well, I guess are you set then?
Good enough.
I got my.
I don't know. I'll look it up
in honor of our colleague G Money.
Twisted Tea. If you're looking to sponsor a pod, we'd love to support. We support you.
So it's the Girly Drink podcast tonight. Awesome.
So this is for G. We'll have a little Vodka Smirnoff later on with a straw, couple of ice.
I forgot my umbrella upstairs, but that's okay. That's fine.
Yeah,
All
that'll
right.
be good.
All right. Well, if you guys are ready, then I'm ready. Let's cock the hammer. It's time for action. All right. So, like I said, it's the kind of a slow time this season. Lots of meaningless, I shouldn't say lots, there's not lots. There's a few meaningless kind of stories that are out there. Um, I think a lot of it's just for ratings for different sites, but we'll talk about a couple things here. Maybe we'll get a little bit of a laugh about how stupid some of this is. But first one we want to look at is Joyce Bell says, I'm going to rush for over 1,200 yards. So, well, he said he's going to rush for over 1,200 yards. That's the minimum to him. He said, if I do less than that, I'll be surprised. I'll be disappointed. Anything more than that, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Jim Caldwell, he's kind of known as a bit of a running coach. They plan to emphasize the run a little bit more. So Blister, buy or sell? Joyce Bell is smoking crack or can seriously hit this mark?
Buy on the crack. I don't think he can hit that mark at all. I just, Joik is a guy who's played well. He is getting up there in age, but I don't think he's got a lot of miles on him yet. I just don't think that he's going to hit the 1,200 yard mark. I think he's got, Amir Abdullah there, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And Theo Riddick, and right now he's not 100% healthy even. So I just don't think so. If Calvin stays healthy, he's going to still get his attention. He's going to get the ball. They like to throw. I just don't think he can make it. I just think that Joik at this point in time, I'm not even sure how healthy he'll be to start the season, but I think he's got competition there, and because of that, I don't think he's going to get the ball as much.
So let's just talk about this offense a little bit. It's kind of a good segue. We just finished our rookie draft in our Dynasty League a couple of weeks ago. Where do you put Abdullah? Just in rookie running backs, redraft right now. No, we're not even going to talk Dynasty, but just if you look at him in a redraft, just off the top of your head, where do you kind of slot him? You put him ahead of Gurley this year? Do you put him
Abdullah?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like,
who's ahead of him? Who do you got ahead of him? You got Yeldon, probably.
Yeldon.
You got Gordon, probably.
Oh, definitely. I'd have to pull up my ranks. I haven't even looked at them recently, but I even think Tevin Coleman could produce more than him this year.
How about Duke?
Gurley potentially could. Yeah, Duke worries me because of that three-pronged attack they got, but and it's so wishy-washy there.
Okay.
But I just think that Amir Abdullah is a guy that's going to go. It probably will go in your redraft leagues, but late, and I don't think he's going to cost you too much. Like maybe you're paying $1, $2, $3 at the most. But he does have that great potential that, I'd almost rather draft him than wait on the waiver wire for him to produce and sit on him. If he doesn't get too much action in the first 3 or 4 weeks, I'd rather take him late in your draft for $1 than get into the bidding war that it's going to take should he become relevant in week 4 or 5 more so, because he's going to cost you a lot of your fab budget. When if you can get him late in the draft and have a spot for him on your bench, if it's deep enough, then take him then and just sit on him for a while, because I think you will get the opportunity. But I see guys ahead of him.
See, I shouldn't say I like Abdullah. I look at him as far as rookies, and I like Yeldon. I like Gordon this year, obviously. Gurley, you like him because he's a stud. You just don't know how many games he's going to play yet. But after that, I kind of have a hard time finding anyone else that I feel like could be above Abdullah. I'm not as high maybe as I think you are, and I know other guys in some of our leagues are on Tevin Coleman. And then, I like Duke Johnson, but I get, like you said, there's this kind of mess in the backfield there, and I think Crowell's obviously going to get carries, and David Johnson, I think he's still going to lose touches to Ellington unless he gets hurt. So I like you, I'm not super high on Joik. What I like then about Abdullah is, and we can kind of get into this as an offense as a whole, I guess. I think the Lions are realizing that Stafford sucks. I shouldn't say sucks. But I look at it like, and actually someone on Twitter, this was over a month ago probably, brought up a good point. They compared what the Lions are doing to what the Bengals did a few years ago, or just a couple years ago with Dalton. I think they realized that, hey, Andy Dalton isn't very good. If you can build even just a mediocre defense, it doesn't even have to be a Seattle Seahawks caliber or anything, or even good. It just has to be mediocre enough that you can force some 3-and-outs, control field position a little bit. You don't have to throw the ball. That means, hey, we can take it out of our bad decision-making quarterback's hands and run the ball. And this is where I'm a little uncertain about what this Lions, offense can be. They address the offensive line a little bit. Can Joyk get to 1,200? If we go back to the original question, I don't think so. But I wouldn't be shocked if he gets, close to 10 touchdowns if they're going to commit to running it. I mean, other than Calvin, and yeah, Golden Tate is good, and this isn't to hurt your feelings, and I know you have him in Dynasty, but if you look at his splits last year, he only put up huge games when Calvin was out, which makes sense, right? I mean, there's obviously someone has to pick up that slack. So Ebron, he disappointed a little bit, and still young tight end. We don't know what we're going to get. I just don't see them throwing it tons. So I like Joyk. I don't think he's going to be, but would you take him as an RB2?
Joyk?
Yeah.
Well, I think so. I mean, he did well last year. I mean, he finished in the top. He finished as an RB2 last year. He was quite serviceable, especially now that, he's going to be the guy they might rely on. If he's healthy, he gets a start, right? I just don't see him getting 1,200 yards with the other two guys there that potentially could spell him off and maybe be on the, he was the third down back at one point. He was the guy catching the passes and stuff. And we know he can do that. That's a great point.
Yeah.
So
he can catch the ball.
Do that. That's right. And that was what was great about him. He made he did well. He often got some of the goal line work too. So he's got a lot of pluses going for him. I guess it's his health. I mean, and realistically, he should get the nod ahead of everybody that's there right now. And if he takes off and runs with it, well, I think again, he's a guy that you're going to get fairly cheap too because of Abdullah, right? He's not going to cost you a top dollar like some of the other guys, but has a chance because of that offense still could put up some really solid points for you. And you think of other guys too when we're talking about that offense, a guy like Theo Riddick. Theo Riddick could be a Danny Woodhead type of guy.
That's it. I was going to say, he's not going to steal carries, right? He's just going to, if anything, catch passes, which I think he's still an injury away now, but he's there though.
He could catch 60 balls this year. And I was looking at some of Danny Woodhead's stats. He finished in 2013 19th because he had 76 catches in San Diego. And he's a guy, I think we're going to talk a bit later about running back strategy, and I'm going to be writing an article soon about it as well. But he's a guy that's going to be under the radar, and you're going to get him for $1. You're going to get guys like Theo Riddick, Roy Hulu. There's 3 running backs right there. If you're in a PPR league that you should be targeting, Woodhead, Hulu, Riddick, maybe in that order. Woodhead's shown us what he can do. Helu can, but Latavius Murray is relatively unproven. He's a running back that you're probably going to pay around $24 for, but Helu you'll get for $1, and Helu could overtake him. Murray's stats last year were ridiculous, but it was based on that one game. He had 4 carries for
Doug Martin effect, won a big game.
Yards out. Yeah, exactly. So that a little bit later on running backs, but Theo Riddick, since we started off talking about Detroit, get back to the focus here, but he's the guy I would look at. I wouldn't disregard Joyk, especially if you don't want to pay top dollar on a running back. If you only have to pay $7 or $8 or $9 on Joyk, and eventually he gets replaced, and you have both of his other guys on the bench for $1 or one of them or something like that, then it's not that bad. You're getting an RB1 basically for $10, or easily I think you could get them for $10. So you'll see.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good. I mean, I'll say this, I think, and maybe we get into this later. I know you're a lot higher on Riddick than I am, and I don't think that he's talented. Well, I shouldn't say that. He's a talented pass catcher. I'm just not sold that he can do a lot of other things that would make him an every down running back should there be an injury, but he can catch the ball. And if the right guy gets hurt, then he is, like you said, serviceable in a PPR league with an injury. But we'll get into this a little bit later,
Yeah, and if Joy goes down, I don't know at this point either that it would be Theo that would. Theo's role might not change no matter who.
Yeah.
Joy goes down, Abdullah could roll into the number one, and Theo could still have that change of pace, pass catching back and stuff like that. Not that Abdullah can't catch the ball; you think he can too, but
Mhm.
I think you're right. It's hard to imagine Theo Riddick as an RB1, but
Well,
he
and
has some
I'll
value
say
to you.
I was definitely higher on Riddick 2 months ago than I am now, because at the end of last year, I think some people were, liked what they saw in limited action. And then we heard rumors that Detroit would spend a high draft pick on a running back, and they did, which now kind of shoots Riddick's value in the face a little bit. But whatever.
Oh,
I
for
mean, hey,
sure.
a guy you want to take a flyer on, and you own Abdullah or you own um, Joik Bell, in an auction draft, and you want to spend your last buck on Riddick, I don't think, especially if it's a deep league, I don't think anybody can fault you for that necessarily.
That's right. Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
moving on. Russell Wilson potentially leaving Seattle in 2016. So I'm kind of anxious to get your thoughts on this, because I feel like it's going to be along the lines of what a lot of other people are thinking. But so just as a little back note here, this was first reported by our good friend, everybody's good friend, Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk. So he said the possibility of the Seahawks opting not to pay market value for Russell Wilson is becoming a reality, especially after what we saw with Joe Flacco. And apparently Russell Wilson's already accepted this possibility that he'll be moving on. So buy or sell, Blister, the Seahawks would be willing to do this, or is Mike Florio simply looking for some more clicks for Pro Football Talk?
I think they'd be. I don't think they're willing to do that at all. I just think that's almost ludicrous to think along that line. A guy who's gotten to the Super Bowl, in his first what is it, 2-3 years here, they've been to the Super Bowl, won it. I mean, that's the record there. It stands for itself, and we all know, like, good teams without a good quarterback are not good teams. Like, they fall off the radar pretty fast. You've seen, even look at Arizona last year. I mean, they were doing okay when Carson Palmer was there, and they still managed to make the playoffs by scamming. And look at how pitiful their performance was in the playoffs. I mean, they had a terrible, terrible showing because their quarterback play was so poor. So it doesn't matter how many studs you have and how good your defense is. If you have a quarterback that can't move the ball, make good decisions, and is not clutch, as I'd say Russell Wilson is, then you're going nowhere. And they don't really have anybody waiting in the wings that they could look and say, well, this guy can do the job, or this guy. I mean, they don't have that. So Russell Wilson is going to be there. They'd be foolish not to keep him around. You can see teams don't very often move their stud quarterbacks. Not very often do good quarterbacks not stay with their franchise almost the entirety of their career. I don't see that happening very often. So I would be just shocked. I mean, Tavares Jackson and BJ Daniels are on their depth chart. They are not the answer. So I don't think Seattle is tired of winning. I don't think anybody gets tired of winning. So that's never going to happen. I can't imagine it. That would be the worst move in history.
Yeah, well, and like you said, I mean, I don't think we've ever seen a quarterback this young with that's accomplished this much in his young career, where this is even talked about. I mean, well, I shouldn't say maybe it's talked about, but it's never actually followed through with. I think maybe Denver this happened to with John Elway, but I mean, John Elway didn't win a Super Bowl at this stage in his career. And I mean, they were literally a couple yards from winning another Super Bowl potentially. And I mean, if that's the case, I can't see how this is even a topic. I think Seahawks have to pay him anything, whatever they have to, if that happens. So I don't know. I find it hard to believe that they would actually do this, and I get it though. I mean, teams that become really good have these kinds of issues, right? They typically become good because they have young, inexpensive players become good, and we're seeing it on their defense. They had to sign, Earl Thomas, and they're going to have to sign Bobby Wagner and all these guys on the defense. Well, where are they going to spend it on offense? So unfortunately, that's the reality of becoming good in the NFL, and all teams have to go through it if you have success. So as a Niners fan, have fun, Seattle. Hopefully you make all the wrong choices, but I can't see them letting him go. But who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe Mike Florio, he's got lots of good sources, so we'll see.
It'll be shocking, but I guess in business is business. You never know what could happen, but it would be awful for Seattle if that happened, I think.
Where would you
we'll
want to
see.
see
Time
him end
will
up?
tell.
Where would you want to see him end up?
Oh, I don't know. I've never even thought about that before. I mean, there's a lot of places he could help. Oh boy, you'd help that team. I mean, look at those guys they have there. I mean, he's definitely got some better receivers. I mean, Fitzgerald's not going to be there forever, but Michael Floyd, if he ever came along, John Brown could be a nice receiver. Yeah, it'd be scary. It'd be scary almost anywhere he went. I mean, if they give him some weapons, because he doesn't, he's got Jimmy Graham now, but other than that receiving core is pretty blah to say. I mean, it's awful, really. Yeah. And what they keep doing, and but what's so great about him for us, for fantasy purposes, is his scrambling and his feet, and he keeps plays alive, and he gets you those extra yards on the ground. And we had him in a league last year where he got a half a point per carry. Well, he was a stud in that league, and I wish we could have got him back this year, but he was scooped up pretty early. For all the bad mouthing about him in that league, he didn't last very long when we went to the redraft. So
I remember when you guys were drafting.
Yeah. And when I took him, even I don't think they looked at the scoring for the league too closely, because we took him, and I mean, I knew that he had. I mean, we had looked at his stats from the year before, and based on how he performed, I mean, he was a top 2 quarterback then. So I knew we had to grab him when we did. Unfortunately, we couldn't get him back this year. That's the ECL for the boys that are listening.
Oh, well, you'll still do all right. You got a pretty decent quarterback.
Yeah, I got to work. I got a couple irons in the fire right now to try to get Dez, but I need to secure an 11th round, which is the first round of our rookie draft. I already traded that pick away for next year, but I need to get it back somehow, and then I can get myself Dez. So I'd love to get Dez on my team.
Wouldn't we all? That'd be nice.
No kidding.
All right. Well, that's it for news. I mean, like I said, it's slow. Just a couple big things. We're not going to go with Brady and old Deflategate. We'll wait until something actually happens. Yeah, it has. So maybe we'll move on here to just a couple things that questions, points of interest from people or from social media, things like that. We'll just talk football a little bit because that's what we like to do. How's that sound?
I love it.
All right.
I like that.
And Uncle
like
Buckets,
that.
You can suck it. Enjoy your Long Island tea.
Yeah, exactly. He should be. I'm disappointed. Right. He should be on live right now listening to us. He should be on YouTube watching this right now. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
A good host would do that. Yeah.
It's shoddy cell service out there, maybe. That'll be his excuse.
We'll give that to him, yeah.
Okay. We'll text him later and rouse him.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first...
Sorry. Yeah. I keep cutting you off. Just tell him phone lines are lighting up. We couldn't keep the callers off the air.
All these questions. Okay. So one of the first things, and this was a common theme that a couple of guys had emailed us questions about this. So I kind of tried to sum it up into one kind of generic statement. Maybe we can touch on a few different points as we kind of hash this out. The common type of question, though, is in an auction draft, when do you want to spend more than your allotted budget on a player?
I would say personally, my take is, say you have your goal is to get 2 top-notch running backs or 3 top receivers or Gronk or something like that. Then I think you have to be willing to spend more on them. And I would say, easily $5 more, maybe up to $10 more. You might have to have a limit. Say you're budgeting 60 for AP and another 45 for I don't know, Le'Veon, even though he's going to be, because he's suspended. Do you think that that's reasonable? You got $105. And so if you stop right at 60 and then he goes for 61, and at the end of the draft, you're sitting there with $6 left or $1 left, you're going to be kicking yourself thinking, why didn't I bid that one more dollar? And it's so hard in an auction to end the auction with completely $0. You know, you have $1 left and you buy your last guy, whether it's a kicker or whatever, you got him for $1. Perfect. I budgeted that perfect. It's so hard to do that because every auction, we've said it time and time again, you can't predict how it's going to unfold, and you can't predict exactly how much people are going to go for. And you know, you add in a few wobbly pops, and people might be they might not do anything that you could have predicted. You know, knowing the Dolphin fan over there wants Tannehill and Jordan Cameron and blah blah blah. You know, all of a sudden he doesn't want him, or he doesn't even know what's going on. Whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's hard to predict what's going to happen. It's hard to predict and spend that money. And even when I'm mocking, and I think about every one I've been in, I look back and think, man, I still got money left. And why did I stop bidding at, you know, on somebody and they went for $3 more and I have more than that sitting here. So always go when you know what you want and who you want. Like you might want 2 top end running backs, but you might really like AP and you might really like LaShawn McCoy or whatever. Well, you know, budget something for them, but don't be scared to go a little bit higher. And $10 seems awful high. If you budgeted 60 and you got to go to 70, well, that might be something that you could backtrack and hold off on that and then recalculate. But I think you got to be willing to go over your limit and, you know, easily $5, $6. And then if it's beyond that, then maybe you let go and reevaluate. What do you think, Slim?
Well, there's 2 times that I like to do it. And I'll kind of explain them, but when you can, and not to sound sarcastic, and when you have to. Those are the 2 times that I like to spend more. So what do I mean by when you can? Well, you oftentimes find, based on your budget, maybe you've got some values at other positions, and that means you've accumulated maybe $10 extra that spend anywhere you want to, that, you know, you've saved some money on various players. So, you know, maybe you want to go get this RB2 and there's only a couple names left and you just say, you know what, I'm getting this guy. I really want this guy. Or maybe you planned on getting Calvin Johnson and you got him for $5 less than you wanted, and you wanted Rob Gronkowski. And the price is going up a little bit more than what you know, you got $5 extra. So spend it on that guy. If you really want that guy, go spend it. And the second time is when you have to. A lot of the times you'll see this happen. And I know, Blister, you wrote a good article about this last year. We call it the horseshoe effect or the U effect in different tiers. Oftentimes what you'll see is a lot of guys go a little bit higher than the normal price when at the beginning of when the first few guys taken from a particular tier, the prices kind of balance out or even get lower in the middle of that tier. And when there's about 2 or 3 guys left, usually about two guys left in a tier, especially at the top tiers, we're talking like tiers 1, 2, 3. When guys look at their board and think, oh man, there's only 2 wide receiver 2s left in this draft. Now we see guys overpaying because they are saying to themselves, I have to get this guy. And if you find yourself in that position, which isn't ideal, to use a poker reference, it's like sitting there and blinding yourself out until, you know, you have nothing left and you go all in with a tiny amount of chips and you make some anyone can call you with any hand. You don't want to get yourself into this position where you have to spend to get this player. But we see it a lot, and we see it a lot with running backs, and you're going to see it a lot with running backs, I think, this year. The elite RBs, they're hot commodities. I think in some drafts, the prices are going to get somewhat insane, and a lot of people are going to pull out, and they're going to look and say, you know, maybe all that's left out there is DeMarco Murray and, you know, Arian Foster or something, guys like that. Those are the 2 elite guys left, according to your board. You're going to say, well, shit, I need one of those guys. I'm going to spend whatever I have to get them. And all of a sudden you're spending $55 on Darren McFadden, right, Canfield? We saw that in our home league a few years ago. But it happens. It happens all the time when you're the last guys. So those are, to me, the 2 times when you spend more. I'm not saying they're ideal, but those are the times when you're going to have to do it.
Let me talk one more. I'll go back to that horseshoe effect thing you mentioned.
Sure.
Okay, like you said, it's really true. You'll see guys, for example. Let me take let's. I'm going to list off some receivers here: Antonio Brown, Jordy Nelson, Demaryius Thomas, Dez, Odell, Julio, AJ, Calvin, and Alshon. We'll say there's 9 guys, pretty solid receivers who you'd probably be happy to have them on your team. So you're thinking, okay, well, somebody throws Demaryius Thomas up and he's going for 40, 45. I'm going to hold off on him because there's still 8 other guys I would take. And so this happens 2 or 3 times. And all of a sudden, you had your eye on Antonio Brown and people haven't thrown him out there yet because they're hoping people will spend their money and won't be able to go for him. All of a sudden it gets down to Antonio, Calvin maybe, and Alshon. There's only 3 of those 9 guys you had left. All of a sudden now, those guys, Antonio, if he was nominated in the first couple, maybe perhaps, people would say, I won't pay that much for him because there's lots of guys left. If he gets down to the last couple guys, you're going to probably pay $10 more than you would have earlier on. So it's one of those things where, don't go into your draft thinking that people don't know these elite guys, the top end guys. If they're not nominated, the only reason they're not nominated is because they want them and they're hoping they're going to get them cheap. But the problem with that is, if you wait, it's such a strategy. That's what's so great about auction, right? There's so much strategy involved. It's not just, the next man up, he needs a quarterback, so maybe I better take mine now, or there's a run on running back, so I want to, it's that's what snake drafting is. But in an auction, you really got to think, do I want to put Antonio on the board right now? I'd love to have him on my team. I don't want to pay $60. Maybe I can get him for 45. And then all of a sudden, you don't nominate for a while. Again, all the other guys are gone. When he comes up now that it's going to cost you money. So maybe you're 11th. And, you want money to be spent, but you kind of, there's been no wide receivers. Maybe you don't have to nominate one yet. Maybe you wait until it comes back to you, or maybe there's been 3 wide receivers already nominated and off the board. And there's one of these top end wide receivers you want. You better get him out there, because otherwise if it goes by you and it comes back and he's still there, but he's the only top tier receiver, there's only 2 or 3 of them left, and that there's 7 guys in your draft that don't have one of those top end receivers, well, now you're going to be paying big dollar. But it's such a strategy, I guess, and it's really, that's what you say. You don't know what's going to happen, because maybe you're nominating first overall. Are you going to throw Antonio Brown out there when everybody's got $200 in their pocket? Probably not. But when it comes back to you, the 13th player nominated, is it too late? Is it safe? Now, do you have to really wait for, you know what I mean? Everybody knows they're there. So you really got to try to get your boy on the board if you're nominating before you get to the bottom end of that horseshoe, because otherwise he's going to be overpriced. And there's no foolproof method of doing that.
No.
Just don't, I guess it goes to a nominating strategy. Don't just nominate guys you don't want. You got to depend on, in your mind, how many people are left in that tier, and get them out there when you think you're going to be able to get them at the best price. If you really want somebody, if you have no interest in the top end tier running back, just keep throwing them out there. Don't worry about it. Let somebody else bid on them.
And that's and that's why I agree. I think I hate the strategy where people just say, "Oh, it's auction. You just nominate guys you don't want." Yeah, you can do that, and sometimes that works, especially the first couple rounds. But like you said, and anyone who's done multiple auction drafts has had this happen, probably on both ends to them. I can think twice last year, for example. I was on the good end in our home league. I got now it was AJ Green. I got him for what I thought was an awesome price, because he was probably the 3rd wide receiver taken off the board, and it was very early in the draft, and guys were sitting there waiting for maybe it was Antonio Brown. I don't know who they were waiting for, but there was lots of the guy sitting to my left, I remember, he got Calvin Johnson for roughly the same price. We were both pretty happy, thought they were good deals. And then I look at the fan league I was in. It was probably the toughest draft I did all of last year. I was waiting for wide receiver 2, and I had about 5 guys that I liked, and Antonio Brown was one of them. All of a sudden, he went for way more than I wanted to pay. No worries. There's still 4 guys. Well, one of those guys go. It came down to Pierre Garçon and Michael Crabtree were the only 2 guys left that I thought these are anywhere near legitimate wide receiver 2s. Turns out they both sucked, got shit, and I got stuck with Crabtree, and I got finished dead last in that fan league. But it was one of those things where I was stuck between a rock and a hard place, and then I had a ton of money left, so I could spend more than I had to on those guys, but I had a ton of money left because I didn't spend it on anybody good, so I was screwed. So it's one of those things where you've got to, and it's hard. Like you said, there's no foolproof way. We can't just say, oh, well, when this player goes off the board, okay, you've gone too far. It's time to go. You got to look at your tiers, trust your rankings, and try and predict what's. Yeah, well, you got to look at what everyone else's boards are doing.
You got to watch all the time, and you got to stay up on that and be alert because, like you said, you want to see money spent on guys you don't want. That just it's nice to throw a name out there, sit back, and let the bidding war go, and think the more they get spent, the better because you don't care. But all of a sudden, if you catch it, you find that the guys that you're targeting are left out there, but they're at the bottom end of that horseshoe, then you're going to way overpay for them, and you need to because, like you said, there's nothing worse than having a ton of money left and getting stuck with Pierre Garçon and guys like that who are not good, and Crabtree who they both had rotten years, and it's sad. It's awesome if it works that you got money, you bought them for $12 or something, and they blow up and have a wide receiver 1 or low wide receiver or wide receiver 2 numbers. It'd be all right, but that doesn't happen a lot, when there's studs ahead of them.
Yeah, and we've all had that feeling where we've left our draft, shaking our heads, feeling sick to our stomachs because we just wasted the last 4 or 5 hours of our life doing a live draft that we can't take back until another year. We just got to tough it out and get shit on by all our friends for 12 months. But
what were you thinking? How did you pick him? It's a good time.
The only team when everyone's sitting there, oh, this team's good, this team's got a chance, and then no one's talking about your team because everyone realizes it's asswipe.
That's embarrassing.
That's when you get drunker, I guess.
I think this team will be okay. In 2012, they would have been great.
Exactly. All right, so moving on. I threw a couple names down here because I've been on Twitter a lot lately, just reading, and before we get into it, if you're not on social media and you play fantasy football, you should be, because you're missing out. There's tons of free resources out there written by super knowledgeable guys that do lots of research. Like I said, to me, the one recommendation I could make to anybody that is doing fantasy football is to get on social media, specifically Twitter, because there's just so much information out there. You can't find it anywhere else. I don't care what you Google search. You're never going to come up with as good of free stuff as you will on Twitter. But anyway, 2 names that are being thrown around on Twitter like mad right now are Brandon Cooks and Allen Robinson. People are, then the majority of people are predicting fairly big breakout years by these 2 guys. So I guess I want to throw it out there to you, Blister. Who are some players that you feel are getting overhyped right now? Or are these 2 guys getting overhyped? Maybe they're getting the right amount of hype. I don't know. We can discuss that.
I think Cooks is definitely in line for a big year. He worked a lot with Breeze in the offseason, I know. And he was good last year, more so at home than he was on the road. And he's going to have to produce stats on the road this year too to become a true, wide receiver 1 or threaten the wide receiver 1 type category. But you got to look at what they've done there. They have Marcus Colston, who isn't getting any younger. They got rid of Jimmy. Kenny Steele is gone. So who's going to get the targets? So they're going to have to throw the ball. They're not going to just, they have a great quarterback in Drew Brees. They're not just going to take the ball out of his hand and hand it off time and time again to Ingram and Spiller. So I think Cooks I like him, and I know going in an auction right now and in different drafts, he doesn't cost as much as a lot of these other guys, and he has potential to put up wide receiver one numbers. He's young. If you look at some of the guys ahead of him that are older, that are obviously good, but they do have their fair share of injury troubles. I think Cooks really has that opportunity ahead of him here right now, and I mean, he played well as a rookie. Averaged almost 14 fantasy points per game, which is pretty solid, and I think he is. A lot of targets have left town in Kenny Stills and Jimmy Graham, so he's not going to get them all. But I think his value's got to go up. And on the same note, a guy like Marcus Colston, guys just are writing him off because he had a bit of a down year last year, but he produced when Cooks was out. He started producing stats again. He has a rapport. He's been Breeze's one of his main wide receiver targets for the last few years, but yet he isn't getting any love in an auction or in a draft. I even offered it to somebody the other day. Oh, he's injury prone. I looked up and he'd missed 2 games in the last 3 or 4 years only. And the guy was trying to sell me Darren McFadden. I said, injury prone? Look at the guy who's trying to trade me. He was a bag of garbage. I said, who are they going to throw to? He's a veteran receiver. He's good in the end zone, in the red zone, and he's a guy that he should have a great year, but he's really underlooked. Allen Robinson, I do like. I think he got the most targets and most looks and was the most consistent receiver in Jacksonville when he was there. What does bother me or worry me a little bit, I don't get me wrong, I love to have him on my team, but him compared to Cooks is he's got Hearns there, he's got Marquise Lee, Julius Thomas, he's got a younger, less proven quarterback throwing him the ball. So those things worry me. At the same time, their team could be trailing plenty, and they could have to throw the ball a lot. So if he's the most reliable, most consistent receiver, and he led the team in targets. So I think when he was playing, when he was healthy, I don't see that trend, going away. And he's a big target. So I like him as well. I do think both those guys are great. And honestly, both of them, if you want to go after some top end running backs, maybe you think because there's such a deep wide receiver class, you want to go after running backs. If you budgeted about, I honestly think you'd get both those guys probably around $50 total, $55, $60. So you could have 2 guys that push the wide receiver one range and get, versus if you were buying Odell Beckham and Antonio Brown, you could be paying 110 for the 2 of them, or anywhere from 100 to 120 for those 2 receivers. And you could have, and definitely they're awesome guys. You love to have them, but you could spend that much on your running backs, and you could have 1 or 2 of these other guys like Robinson and Cooks on your roster potentially for a lot less money. So it might be a strategy for if you're going running back heavy. From what I've seen so far in the mocks, they haven't been. I just want to pull them up here. I have some numbers. I think I bought Cooks in a few.
I've got them a lot.
35. Well, I know you can see how the prices are changing. I bought him once for $2, May 30th. I thought that's ridiculous. They don't know their information. Melvin Gordon was the same. And then I bought him for 26. And then the last time it was one of those situations where I wanted another good receiver, and I got him for 35. So I paid more than I probably normally would, but I think I started that draft off with Jeffrey, Cobb, and Cooks. So 3 pretty good receivers. Mm-hmm. So anyways, yeah, that's my take on those guys. You want to talk a bit about them before we move on to some other hyped and not hyped enough?
Well, I'll say that I have been on the hype train, I think, on both of them. And if Beckett was here, he would probably throw some comment about Allen Robinson because, one, I owned him in Dynasty and then traded to Buckets. So I have been high on him since last year, actually. I loved him coming out. I think he's going to have a big year. I think more so in PPR. That's only because, the volume of targets that he could see, but also I think he's going to have there'll be a lack of touchdowns just because of how shitty the Jaguars' offense could very well be. But who knows? I mean, if he gets 6 touchdowns, be all right. I can't see too many more than that. But so I think in PPR leagues, he has a little bit more value. Brandon Cooks is, to me, I have him as a low-end wide receiver 1. I have him, I think, as my wide receiver 11. I don't have my rankings up in front of me. I can't pull them up right now. But If not, he's my wide receiver 13 then, so he'd be a high end wide receiver too. And to me, the biggest thing is, and you touched on it, and everyone kind of knows this innately. They lost a lot of targets, and I look and think that dude in that type of offense could, to me, he should have 140 targets coming up this year. And when I look at the guys that had 100, Emmanuel Sanders had 140 targets. Golden Tate had 140 targets, 143 with Calvin Johnson missing time. Macklin had, Alshon Jeffrey had 145. Calvin Benjamin had 145. That's pretty good company for fantasy production, as far as I'm concerned. And what worries me maybe a little bit is his touchdowns, just because of his frame. He's going to be more utilized, through the middle of the field, maybe as a slot guy. I got to see him do more in the red zone, but I think the volume is going to be there. And to me, he'll be like Emmanuel Sanders in a sense was last year. And I mean, we saw him come out of nowhere and be a wide receiver 1. So to me, if Brandon Cooks is catching 8 to 10 passes every week and maybe more, the sky's the limit, quite honestly. My worry is that everyone's going to realize this, and then it's one of those things where it's my new favorite saying. I think this year I'm going to make it into a t-shirt. If everybody thinks he's a value, he's not a value. And I think that's quickly what's going to be happening with Brandon Cooks. So everybody in your draft is going to think, oh man, he's going to be my sneaky little wide receiver 2. It's got wide receiver 1 upside. Well, yeah, fat chance, because everyone else in your draft is probably thinking the same thing.
That's right. Yeah. Am I off mute?
Yeah, you are. I can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. Hey, so looking at some more receivers that we're talking about, like I got another guy, second-year receiver, Jordan Matthews. I think he's underhyped. I don't see a lot about him, and I don't see him going for a whole lot of money in mocks, but yet, Philly runs a high-paced offense. Jeremy Macklin left town. He defaulted right to the number 1 receiver there, yet he doesn't get the love as some of the guys ahead of him do. So yeah. I think he's the guy that, again, if you want to save some money and still have potential, he's going to be the number 1 in Philadelphia. Bradford can't do it. Sanchez still did a fine job, and those guys put up good numbers when he was at quarterback. So I wouldn't be scared of Jordan Matthews, because they got 2 guys that could get him the ball. And I think even way later in the draft for $4 or $5, Brandon LaFell. Every time. Guys go into New England, and they go to New England, and it takes a while for them to learn the offense. And I remember whining about this last year or whatever. And, I said, how come it takes long to learn the offense? Like, Tom Brady just throws it 6 yards at a time, and the receivers have to make all the yards themselves. Like, they never had really a downfield threat. But Brandon LaFell got stronger and stronger and became a pretty big target for Tom. And I think he could be another guy. I mean, that offense is one of the better offenses in the league. Julian Edelman's the same type of guy. He gets a little. I mean, Julian might cost you $20, but Edelman or LaFell, might cost you $6. And I think that they had similar numbers last year: 222 fantasy points for Edelman, 212 for LaFell. And I mean, the first few months took a while to get going, and it took Brady a while to get going and get everybody on the same page. So there's a couple of receivers, anyways. Who else do you have, Slim, at receiver? If we want to move on, we can move on to a different position. But do you have anybody else that you're seeing?
Underhyped
or overhyped?
I think, to me, I don't have too many guys that are overhyped right now, honestly. To me, the list is long for guys that are underhyped. And I think it's maybe because there's so many of these young guys that are being hyped up, and whether it's over. I mean, if I would say maybe an over guy, someone that jumps out to me, Mike Evans. I'm not sold on what he can do this year, just because I don't know. I don't think Jameis Winston's a bad quarterback by any means, but I don't trust a rookie quarterback. And I don't see Jameis coming in and offering tons more than what they had last year. I mean, talk to me in 3 years. Yeah, hopefully he's blowing, McCown out of the water in 3 years, but Evans was pretty inconsistent last year. So to me, I look and say, all right, he's kind of going to do what he did last year. There's not going to be really tons of any improvement, but he still gets hyped a lot um, because he's so big, I guess, and because he's such a red zone target. Whereas you look at Sammy Watkins, who is as talented, maybe more talented, a lot of people think, and we just accept the fact that his quarterback sucks and he's going to have a shitty year. So, you know, I kind of, not to put Mike Evans in that same category and not to say, you know, Sammy Watkins isn't talented, but I just feel like we're going to get very similar things, but yet we're not looking at them in the same context as having not good quarterback play. And, you know, then there's these veterans, and we talked about this before. To me, Julio Jones is getting overlooked, AJ Green's getting overlooked, and Calvin Johnson's getting overlooked. And a lot of that is because of, you know, Antonio Brown had a huge season. Odell Beckham has this new phenom that's on the scene that's bumping them down a little bit. So I think those three guys are just quietly flying under the radar and could be nice little acquisitions for you. I mean, hey, maybe you get one of those guys as a wide receiver too. You know, someone like Calvin Johnson can slide, you know, to be like a wide receiver 10 maybe or something in terms of auction values in a particular draft. And I mean, if you can save a couple bucks somewhere and go and grab him as a wide receiver 2 and he stays healthy for you, you know, he's putting up over 20 fantasy points a week in PPR leagues. So, you know, there's only a couple guys that do that at wide receiver.
Yeah, and looking at this, I mean, well, there's a lot of names, but I'm just looking at my ranks here, and I last updated them June 15th. But just looking at this, there's a lot of guys I'm probably going to start bouncing around and moving up and down the list. And even, you know, a guy like Anquan Bolden, you know, all reports are the cap is, you know, worked on a lot of stuff, footwork and his release and everything else. Worked with Kurt Warner, and he's looking good, and he's worked hard. And I think Anquan Bolden was the 19th ranked receiver in PPR last year. I don't see any reason why that's going to change. I don't think Torrey Smith is going to change that. Torrey Smith is a boomer bust type of guy, and you know, but Bolden is the guy that's going to move the change, and he's going to get the receptions, and you know, he's the guy that again you're going to get for peanuts in your draft, and I think that
target. He does all these things that you want in your fantasy receiver. He just doesn't have the volume, but who cares if he's your wide receiver 5, right?
Exactly. So I think, you know, guys like that, and I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to adjust my ranks and move some guys up and move some guys down. I can't remember what else I was going to say just now, but looking at them, I got a bit of work ahead of me. I've been making a lot of notes here anyways.
Well, and that's it. This is the time of year, right? This is why you're reading other people's takes on things. I like reading as much as I can from beat writers because they're the guys that are seeing these guys all the time, offering these little tidbits. And if you're not changing your rankings throughout the summer, then you're probably losing because your rankings aren't going to stay the same or shouldn't stay the same as what they were in April. There's just no possible way that should happen. So this is the time. It's a slow time. Sit down with your spreadsheets and crunch some numbers and move things around and start mocking and just keep grinding away.
Sure.
All right. The last one, this can be, and we've touched on this last topic a few weeks, but we're going to go into it in a little more detail because we're starting to mock now. I'm going to defer to Blister a lot. In terms, I'll admit I've been mocking a shit pile for, but it's been for the Scott Fish Bowl. It's coming up in a few days, so I haven't focused much on auction yet. I'm gonna start to here right away. Typically, I wait until July to get into that anyway. But some of the trends that we're seeing, and we're gonna look specifically at running back. We're gonna look at the RB heavy strategy versus the RB zero strategy. So I guess first off, I just will ask you very openly here, if you had to pick one of the two right now, which one do you think, which one have you had the most success with in mocks? Which one gives you the best looking team in your opinion?
Well, I my own personal opinion, I feel a little bit more confident scabbing together a running back committee that can put together the points. I think I love I
which I'll
look at
say is probably the minority, by the way, but that's
yeah.
good.
Yeah, well, I hope I am because then,
Yep.
I like the looks of having three solid receivers to start my team with, and then putting together running backs that I think could potentially produce for me, like Randall and Sims or whoever it is in Tampa Bay. It doesn't matter who it is in Tampa Bay; they're all cheap right now. Different guys like that, and looking at. I mean, I don't know what the cutoff is between like running back zero and whatever, but even Devontae Freeman goes super cheap in drafts, and I think he's
Mhm.
produced. He can produce for you. Gio Bernard, the most recent one I did, got him for $6, and I still think he's got value. I mean, to me, he's no worse a running back than Joik Bell would have been last year, and Joik was helped me to a championship, as did C.J. Anderson, and so that was my two starting running backs in the dynasty in the playoffs, and those guys weren't that for me during the season. So I guess that's why maybe it's a little bit over a sense of security above and beyond what is the norm. I don't know, but Charles Sims, you get him all the time right now for $1. Tevin Coleman, 12. And between him and Freeman, if I could get them for $13, which I did in one of my most recent auctions total, I mean, I got a running back one there for 13 total, right? So,
Mhm.
I kind of. I'm okay with that right now. Jonathan Stewart, even I hate Jonathan Stewart. I never would have considered him ever, but this year I'm actually thinking maybe. And I got him last time for 15. Now, the true RB0 strategy might be getting all your running backs for $1, $2, $3, and I mean that can happen. But I
Yeah.
honestly think that come the end of the draft, like there's only so much money to go around. If everyone has $200, there's 12 teams, there's $2,400, and you can look at how many running backs. You can probably guess. You take your tier one guys from running back, receiver, quarterback, tight end, etc., and add up that money, and that's going to be a big chunk of that $2,400 gone. So you're going to get some decent guys down the road. So I don't think running back zero in terms of auction necessarily means $1 running backs. I think that means you're not paying 50, 40, maybe not 30, maybe not even $20 for your running back, but you're going to be able to get, yourself some decent running backs later on for, $2, $4, $5. CJ Spiller, $4 I got the other day. That's
Oh,
crazy if in a
that's
PPR league.
ridiculous.
TJ Yeldon, $4. TJ, I'm just looking at some. Tevin Coleman, 12. Sims, $1. Devontae Freeman, $1. Well, Davis, $1. I mean, that's a bit of a gamble. Obviously, Charles has to go down, but Gio Bernard,
Yeah.
6. Jonathan Stewart, 15. Frank Gore, 16. Those are running backs I could live with if I could get those guys. So that's the way I feel right now. Things will change probably between now and our biggest auction in August, and I'll probably do a
Yeah.
couple more good ones before then too. But if I was choosing one right now, I would be fine with going heavy receiver.
Yeah, and to kind of go off what you were just talking about, I think, yeah, like you said, the prices are gonna change when you're mocking. Um, you're maybe you're mocking against guys. At this time of the year, the people that are mocking with you a lot of the time, unless you know who they are, and you know they spend all their money on about 4 or 5 guys, and then that's it. Maybe they even leave the thing, the draft room, and
Yeah,
they
some
have
of them
nothing
do.
left. So you can get guys if you stick around. You can get guys for cheap,
Mm-hmm.
but that's okay. I mean, is it giving you a completely accurate price for these mid-level guys or low-level guys? No, maybe not. But at least what I like, at least I can look at a team afterwards and go through the roster and say, you know, am I happy with this? And that's kind of what I've been
Yeah.
doing. And I'm going to give you 2 examples of. If you asked me this a month ago, 2 months ago, I would have thought, yeah, you know what, I'm probably going to go RB heavy in a lot of my pools. Obviously, not all. I like to kind of mix it up in case one doesn't ever work, and then kind of hedging my bets a little bit. But the more mocking I've been doing, the 2 teams that I found that I've liked the best, I had in this one. I'll just go through the players, and you can kind of listen. And I had Demarius Thomas, Odell Beckham, Randall Cobb, Keenan Allen, and Marcus Colston. Those were my receivers. Philip Rivers was my quarterback. Travis Kelce was my tight end. Then my running backs were TJ Yeldon, Latavius Murray, Amir Abdullah, Roy Halou as a handcuff for Murray, and Duke Johnson. And then there was some much later guys. Actually, I even took T. Rich at the very back end of this one just so I could have the whole Oakland backfield. And then the other team where I went even later running backs or even cheaper running backs was, oh crap, what did I do? Demaryius Thomas again was one. Demaryius Thomas, Dez Bryant, T.Y. Hilton, Roddy White, Larry Fitzgerald. Then I had Jimmy Graham and Travis Kelce. Carson Palmer was my quarterback, so I went dirt cheap there. And then Isaiah Crowell, LeGarrette Blount, Devontae Freeman, Duke Johnson, Roy Halou, and then I grabbed Tavares Cadet right at the end as a little bit of LeGarrette Blount handcuff, so to speak. So to me, both of those were the best. And I went running backs really late there. Did I end up with more receivers than I probably need? Yeah, but I can flex all those guys if I have to. It's PPR league, so I can flex them all. And I feel like I can put together a decent running back core, especially in just a start two league, where if I'm going to flex a tight end or a receiver, then I can put two running backs in there. I can put Crowell and LeGarrette Blount if they got good matchups. And you know what? Maybe one of them doesn't do real great for me, but that's okay. I look at it. If I've got Demaryius Thomas, Dez Bryant, and T.Y. Hilton and Jimmy Graham doing all the heavy lifting, catching passes, I feel okay with that. So I will say, coming around to this RB0 a lot more than I was before. To the point where I think I'm liking the teams that I'm drafting better on paper right now than the ones that I'm getting without doing that strategy. So I guess if I was to ask you something, if you were going to pick, say, this RB0 strategy, what are players that you think are key that you need to look for to make that strategy successful? Is there an actual specific player, or is it just a group of players? I mean, we know that there's going to be you're going to have more money to spend on tight ends or wide receivers, or are you going to spend it on a quarterback? What's your take on that?
You know what? I'm not going to be spending anything on a quarterback this year. I've done an article, I don't know if Bucks has put it on the site yet, about if you were streaming quarterbacks, who could you look for? And, I really like the matchups. I like what I'm hearing about RG3 and Kaepernick, and Palmer was great before he got hurt last year. He was a top 10 quarterback in fantasy points per game. And there's just a lot of guys out there that I think you can really scab together, and you can draft a couple of them on draft day. And when you have to drop one to pick up another guy who's got a better matchup, it's not going to hurt you. So I really can't see me spending, any money on quarterbacks. And I know in our auction that quarterbacks are going to be cheaper than the norm. So I have no problem doing that in any draft I go into. I think if I go zero running back, I'll put it into receiver, obviously. I don't hesitate. I love Gronk. I just think that he's going to be pretty expensive. But you got to keep it in perspective, too. When Gronk is Gronk, like he was last year and he was a few years ago, he was not only the number one tight end and miles above other guys, but he ranked a few years ago. He was a number two. I think Jordy Nelson was maybe number one or something. And Gronk was number two overall in any pass catchers as far as fantasy points go. Last year, he still would have been a top 10 if he was in the wide receiver category. He would have finished top 10. When we think about our elite receivers and Odell and Calvin and Antonio and Demaryius and all these guys, he would have been up there and finished ahead of a lot of those guys. So, it's $40 might seem a lot for a tight end, but whoa, man, what you're getting out of that is a lot more than a lot of receivers. You're getting a potential wide receiver one for a tight end for a lot cheaper than you're paying for your wide receiver one. So, you know what? If you're going to save on running back, maybe that's where to put some of it. Some people are still going to go into the draft old school thinking, I got to spend $40 on a tight end. But if you go in there thinking, I'm not spending it on a tight end, I'm spending it on my wide receiver one that's playing in the tight end position, who's going to obviously dominate. So receiver, if you're going low on running back, that's where I think you got to be putting it. You got to be putting receiver, potentially Gronk. Other than that, after Gronk, I wouldn't spend a lot of money on anybody. Jimmy Graham, for every good thing you read, then there's going to be a negative one out there. I mean, it's hit and miss. He was even hit and miss a lot last year. We had games where he got 0 points. So, I think after Gronk, I'm okay with waiting on a tight end and getting somebody else down the road. What about you, Stel?
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, yeah, I've been trying when I go RB0 because I'm the same as you. I'm not gonna spend on a quarterback. My quarterbacks when I've gone RB0 are Flacco, Palmer, Rivers, and Rivers is even maybe a little bit on the higher side. But I mean, to me, there's a whole handful of guys that can become low end quarterback ones this year. So I'm okay taking two of those guys and seeing which one becomes better. So I guess if you're going to go cheap on running back, you're going to go cheap on quarterback. I feel like obviously you're going to spend on receiver. It just leaves you with money where oftentimes I end up with, in every one that I've gone, I've ended up with Travis Kelce in every RB0 that I've gone in or that I've tried. And in one of them, I ended up, like I said, with Graham and Kelce. So, and I agree. I think after Gronk, there is definitely, he's in a tier all by himself. And you could throw in guys maybe like Greg Olsen, maybe Martellus Bennett starts creeping in there. But, it's still a tier of 3 or 4 at the most. And so I feel like I have enough money always where I can get a tier 2 tight end, and hopefully you grab the right one. The thing with those guys is, like you said, they're going to be a little bit inconsistent. There's going to be maybe some weeks where they don't produce very much, but when they do produce, the hope is that they're putting up wide receiver 1 numbers for you in that given week. So but yeah, I think that's the approach you have to take if you're going to go RB0 is, what are you going to keep spending it on? If you go RB0, I've always been able to get 5 good wide receivers, it seems like. And yeah, some of them they're always a couple veterans, whether it's Roddy White, Larry Fitzgerald, Marcus Colston, Anquan Bolden. I always seem to end up with 1 or 2 of those guys. You got to spend it somewhere, and tight end is kind of the next logical step. And so if you really wanted to get crazy, you could stream tight ends and then just blast, Demarius, Dez, and Julio or something like that, which, that might be good too. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that either. So again, it's going to be interesting. I don't know. I can't wait to keep mocking it, actually, and just seeing what more teams look like. And just as the summer progresses, I'm curious if people are going to start coming around to this strategy, because if you would have asked me, a couple of weeks ago, I don't see how you could, everyone would have been fighting for running backs. And I like that I'm having success with this now, as I'm sure you are. Like you said, it's good to be in the minority doing this, because this could work out really nicely, in your draft come August, if you stay in the minority doing this.
It would be nice. Right now, like you said, you're practicing for the Fish Bowl, and I've been doing some mocks in the Fish Bowl. I really like that Draft Wizard on Pro Football Focus, or what is it? Fantasy Pro, sorry. I like that Draft Wizard, so you can go in and mock, because it's a snake, and as far as snakes go, it's a fun one because there's so many experts in the industry out there that we get to play against, and it's just fun, and so I'm in the number 1 slot, and I've been, who do you take number 1 overall? It's PPR. It is quarter point per carry as well, and I'm just debating. I've done mocks where I've taken the running back AP quite often, or Antonio Brown seems to be my number 1 choice, and I like both of them. I don't mind going. If I get my top 3 receivers, if I go 1, 2, 3 receiver, then I can usually, like you said, get Kelce in around the 6th round if I want him. But I get a crap load of good running backs that I think can play for me, even in the 4th or 5th, because I guess the key there I should mention too, it's a super flex, so you can flex a quarterback in one of your flex spots. So a lot of quarterbacks go in the first few rounds, like your top 24 go, but then all of a sudden they're gone and people are really scrambling out for the running backs and the receivers. Well, I don't have a problem drafting RG3 in the ninth or Carson Palmer in the eighth or whatever, and those are my running back or my quarterbacks. And I don't know. Again, it won't unfold exactly like that when the real deal comes up, but yeah, it's hard to say because I've picked some teams there that I like them both. It's basically after you get around your seventh or eighth round, then your teams are almost identical after that because of where you pick and stuff. But it's those first few picks are what you got to live with.
Well, I was listening to a pod, and John Paulson was on it. And for those of you that don't know, John Paulson is like the most accurate and most renowned for his player rankings. So he's a guy, me personally, I take stock into things that he says. And he was discussing this very topic, when to take running backs in a draft. And he did a little research based on last couple of years' data. And he found that what happens is the top two running backs are typically pretty safe. So whoever the consensus or whoever you think are going to be the top two running backs, usually, barring any major injury, they're going to produce. After that, it becomes a 50-50 shot of the other top running backs. So say the top tier or the top 12. Top two are okay. After that, the next 6 to 10, 50%. When you go to receivers, though, they don't produce in PPR leagues. They don't produce as many points, but they're definitely a safer bet. So that's something to consider. I mean, do you go RB heavy and spend a huge chunk of money on a running back who has a good chance to, crap out for you, or at least make, that $50 you spend kind of go to waste, right? Or do you, go with the safer bet for the big money and then spend a lot less on quantity at running back position, where that weekly you might not get elite production, but maybe all you need is RB2 production. So that means with this guy on a given week, based on the matchups, you should hopefully be able to find 2 guys or 3 out of your 5, 6, 7 that you drafted, depending on the depth of your league, that are going to be RB24 in that given week. And that's not necessarily that hard to do if you go and look at the stats of running backs and see how many times were those guys, top 24 running backs. I think you'd be surprised with some of the names that jump out as, I don't want to use the word consistent because they don't do it weekly, but consistent in terms of weekly production, where you can scab guys together and mix and match and play matchups and still get decent results. And just let your receivers, plug and play those guys. Just let them sit there. So it was definitely an interesting thing. And again, it just goes more to this RB0 strategy a little bit. And, if anything, you can take anything from it, go and try it. Just mock it. And just see what you see. And maybe you don't like it, and that's fine. I will say it's probably not for everybody, but I think there's definitely some merit in it. And I think you'll see it gaining steam this summer for sure.
Oh, for sure. There's no better way to prepare yourself than to mock and look at doing both options. And you know what? Some teams you just can't see yourself enjoying and liking, and so you go with whatever you're going to like, or at least going with that theory, and then play the chips as they fall. But I don't know. I think you got to do both things and see how things work out. Like I said, I took AP in this one, and it doesn't look that bad. It just depends how things go, I guess. And auctions are fun though. Like we said, it's all about strategy. We've got a lot of articles about strategy. If you're missing something, if you buy the subscription to the website and you go on there and you're thinking, man, I wish I had some more information about this or about that, chances are we've written it. We probably could put it back out there for you, touch it up, put it with some terms from today, the names, values, and stuff that we're seeing. I'm about to write a couple articles. I'm going to write a article soon about mocks and where they're at right now, and I like to kind of do that a couple times at least a month, when I get some newer data and from my own experiences, so you kind of see what's going on. If you don't have time to mock, at least you can go on there and read and see what the trends have been from the mocks I've done, and then You can take that information with you to your draft. I'm also going to do this. I'm going to do an article with running back heavy and running back zero strategy and what that would look like in terms of auction. You know, if you hear from snake drafts, well, I didn't draft a running back till the 8th round, blah, 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 blah. Well, what does that look like in terms of auction, in terms of dollars and how much money would be spent on them? Like I said, it doesn't mean you're going to spend $5 and get your 5 running backs. I don't think that's accurate, because you're going to find that you can spend a little bit of money because you'll have money. And, you know, maybe you are still only going to draft 5 altogether, 2 starters, potential flex, or 3 for your bench, depending how deep it is, or 5 or 6, you know. And so I guess if you're going running back zero, you're probably going to take a few more running backs, because the big bucks you spent on, say, your receiver, your tight end, well, you're playing those studs no matter what the matchup is. You're playing those guys. And if you go running back zero, you have to have a lot more potential guys that could hit for you. So, you know, you could have to put a few more of them on your bench than you would the receivers who you spent your big bucks on. So, all things to consider, but maybe an article or two with some actual numbers from the most recent mocks will help you out, and that'll be on the website very soon.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, just to end it off here, you know, now that we can get to mocking a little bit more consistently against, you know, real people, you'll start seeing a lot more strategy pieces coming out as we get a better handle on the auction values and just seeing the trends that are out there. So yeah, look for that. I know Blister will be busy here. He's going to be off work here very shortly, and he'll have lots of free time on his hands to golf and crunch numbers and mock auction
drafts. Nothing better than crunching mock numbers and preparing for my own auctions. And you know what? Maybe next week or the week after we can do a mock on the air. We could get know, throw a few shout outs on Twitter, see if some of the people that follow us regularly want to participate in it, and then we can badmouth them on the air. Like you said last year, one of the toughest leagues you were in was the fan league you had.
Yeah.
You know, those guys that do listen, they really, I mean, I remember I felt the same way. My team was awful, and I just got hammered on the fan league trying to draft any guys I liked, and
everyone was in my head. They knew my move before I could do them.
So we'll have to do an auction mock with them and get that on the air.
You bet. All right. Well,
how's our time?
I was going to say that pretty much wraps it up. So yeah, I'm not going to ask you if there's anything you want to add, because I know how much we hate when our regular host does that. So we've added everything that we need to add. Have a happy Canada Day tomorrow. I know I will. Make sure you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at work on Thursday. And for the rest of you guys, we'll see you when it's springtime in the Rockies.